I want to welcome everyone from GFS. Thank you, students and alums, for joining us, and our entire staff and team, New York, LA, and London. At GFS in the last 2 weeks, this has been a time for humility and reflection and for listening. But we've also had a lot of discussions with our board and staff and our students and alums about the best way that we can respond as an organization during this time with intention and purpose and with authenticity in order to best serve our young people right now. And we went back to our own mission statement, which is to educate, develop, and celebrate the next generation of great American storytellers. And we went back to the first word in that statement, which is to educate. And we reached out to the most extraordinary educator that we know. And we asked her if she would come in and lead a special presentation and an interactive discussion with our students today in order to address an essential question of our time, which is, how can an artist respond to this moment? And thank goodness Sheril said yes. So we are tremendously grateful to Sheril Antonio devoting her time and her expertise to lead today's discussion, and to our LA Executive Director, Montea Robinson, who will be moderating questions from our students throughout today's discussion. With that, I will stop speaking and I'll turn it over to our very special guest, Dr. Sheril Antonio, and I'll just ask that you quickly unmute yourselves and greet her with a round of applause.
Way too kind. Thank you, Josh, and all the Montea GFS crew. It's really been an honor and a privilege and a learning experience for me to be involved with GFS and the students for so long. It's brought more to my life, I feel, than I've contributed, but that's how I feel about things I love. And when you're doing what you love, it's never work. So I come to you organically today. We have a slide presentation that I'm going to go through just to ground our conversation, but really to try and give as much time as I can to an exchange, Q&A, and a dialogue, because I think that's what's necessary now. So the slides ground me, but every time I look at them and speak, I'm coming from a different place, because I find that, and it's happening to all of us right now, that we are evolving so quickly every day with who we are, having more time to think, and with what's going on in the world around us. It really is a time of compressed learning in a way that I've never experienced. And so I'm going to try and speak authentically and have you come into the conversation and go from there. So if we go to the slide, just to frame the conversation, the way I think about it is art in times of crisis then and now. That's the general frame I'm offering. But I can also say, when have we not been in crisis? When have groups of us not been in crisis? When has there not been a crisis for someone somewhere, either in America or in some other country, right? I think now people think of a national crisis and a global crisis, but there are lots of small crises, be they personal, be they family, be they community, that are taking place. So when I use the word crisis, I am very open in the small and the large ways of embracing crisis. Next, please. One of the things we have to think about, and one of the things I've been thinking about, and one of the things I do, I'm aware that I'm in America. I'm aware that I'm a Black person, but I'm also aware that Native Americans have been here before us and have had a whole history. I'm aware that we stand on Lenape land here at NYU. And I wanted to first bring you two things to think about from the original Americans. And they've been guiding my teaching, and they've been guiding my work in really important ways. The first is where common memory is lacking, where people do not share in the same past, there can be no real community, right? Which is what we can say is part of the root cause of what's happening in America. We don't share the same history. We don't have the same experiences. But how do we create that, right? So where community is to be formed, common memory must be created. And I think what's happening right now is we're creating an incredible amount of common memory. Thank you to the horrible pandemic and this horrible death of Mr. Floyd and what is going on in the world now. No one can hide from this common memory we are experiencing. And then more towards the life of an artist. This is from Sherman Alexie, who also was the writer for the first film I show in my class every year, which is Chris Ayres' Smoke Signals. Life is a constant struggle between being an individual and being a member of a community, right? And that's also very evident right now in the arts and in what I call the COVID times. Next, please. So we start from there, and I would love if we take just a moment for each of you to think about, what is art to you? What does it mean to be an artist to you? What can art do in the world? What is that? And I beseech you after this to contemplate that and make a note of it. It might change every day, it might change every week, but make note of it. What I want to offer you is what some artists have said, right? Kurosawa says to be an artist means never to avert one's eyes. Means to look at things that you don't want to look at or you would prefer to look away from. Very appropriate to these times. Edgar Degas, a painter, says, art is not what you see, but what you make others see. And Nina Simone, singer and musician, says you can't help it. An artist's duty, as far as I'm concerned, is to reflect the times. Just some offerings, but what is your idea of art? What can art do? What does it mean to be an artist? Next slide, please. When the pandemic started and I'm trying to teach from home and people were asking me everything, I thought to myself, I kept saying out loud, what a time, what a time. And I was asked to speak about how I was dealing in COVID times. And I went to this work of art to make a little speech. And ironically, there at the bottom was the phrase, what a time, what a time. And I didn't even realize that my connection to this work, or the notion of saying it twice, what a time, brought me to this work. But when I was asked to make a speech about my COVID survival and the idea of art, I went to this because there is a single image, albeit a massive tapestry by Kerry James Marshall, right? And we work with the cinema, but here is a single image that endeavors to and captures an entire decade with regard to Black life and Black art. And again, when you have the time, take a closer look at this. In the center, behind the figure who separated from us by a sheer type of curtain, the dates 1960 to 1969, and on the wall behind, all of the people who died during that time. So that a single frame, a single painting can capture a decade. More importantly, a single frame can attempt to capture a decade, right? So one of the ways, we don't have to think of limitations in terms of whatever art we go to try and capture a time. Next slide, please. We also become who we are and express who we are, not only in the work we relate to, but in the work we buy. This is a piece of art that I owned. I saw it in a gallery and I ended up buying it. This was in the period where I was very concerned with our nation being at war. And the notion that our nation is representative of a single race or a single religion. And this, for me, broke that paradigm. This says that the people that are in war, the people that are dying in war, are not just from one religion, but from many religions. So it gave a broader scope of who was living in America and who was dying for America, right? And so that one sees that the same values one has as an artist is also the sort of same values one uses to relate to art or to relate to the art one actually goes out and purchases, right? And this is called God and Country by an artist I've actually shown my own work with, Joseph Eschenberg. Next, please. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about my own art. I was invited to put some work in Southampton, New York, which is not a people of color place necessarily or historically, but I was invited to be in a show. And I chose some works and I thought, you know what, they're not even going to understand my work, but I'm going to put it in anyway. It is not overtly about gender, race, or generation or anything like that. And I was shocked and pleased to see that actually the reporter who was reporting on the show chose my work. Next slide, please. So I'd love for you to take a minute. It's called Red Light and Puddle. You know now it was a submission for a Black History Month show. And I want you to think in your own terms what I was trying to say. And if you feel like it, maybe you shoot me a couple of ideas in the chat. What do you think this means? What am I saying about Black History Month, about Black life in America, in this photograph that's called Red Light in Puddle? What am I saying? Shoot me something in the chat. Don't be afraid. It's a time to stop and reflect. Absolutely, thank you. And you're getting at something here, the literal and the metaphor. Black lives seem to be at a halt in society. Absolutely. Keep going. You're doing awesome already. And by the way, this was a long time ago. This was not a recent show, right? What else are you seeing in it? I'll give you turning the ideas that we know on their head. Absolutely. The sense of upside down. Yes. Reflection, raw reflection. Yep. Maybe the idea that difficulties in the world we live in today are a reflection of the way we treat one. Yep, absolutely. Shine a light on the world around us. Reflection, absolutely. Different realities, by the way, is one of the subgroups of the work. Something, yep. Things keep keeping us stagnant. Absolutely, puddles are stagnant. So you're getting it. You're absolutely getting what this work is about. Parallels of society, reflections, upside down, this red light, all metaphors. Thank you so much for taking time to do that. And so I was really surprised, but I hope you hear in me that I put work out there that I don't know if people are going to understand. I know what it means to me, right? But I'm not sure people are going to get it. Now, in this instance, this person who wrote the article got it, but sometimes your work doesn't always get the right reading. Next, please. So your art, we're going to talk about your art today. And when I say your art today, what you think your art is today and how you feel today, right? And that's going to be the conversation. Next, please. I use this quote all the time in my class, and in these times I've had to change it. It's my favorite quote because I believe in it, particularly for women, people of color, anybody who's not in the center of society. This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There's no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. Yes, but the way I've changed it is there is absolutely now time needed for despair. There is absolutely now time needed for silence. There is absolutely now room for fear. Because for some of us, our safety is in peril. And so, yes, I believe in this, but yes, now I am leaving room for certain things. Next, please. I want to refer you to things I want you to think about later. This is just how some people I know are responding. Spike Lee, artistic director of the graduate film program where I work. Patty runs his office. He edited a piece called Three Brothers, right? He had edited a piece linking Eric Gardner and Do the Right Things, Radio Raheem. Now he's added Floyd to that. Next, please. There's a video I really want you to watch. Ask yourself, when did my baby become a threat to you? I want each of you yourselves to read this slide. I'm not going to read it for you. Next, please. This is a piece by a faculty member who teaches in our undergraduate film and television program. It's a short movie called Make America Safe Again. And in these times, one wonders if the word again is appropriate for some groups of people. Make America safe. Make America safe again. Are there people who have always been in peril in some way in America? So emerged in me have been a lot of questions. Next, please. One of the things I've been very interested in is art that makes it the cultural exchange of art, right? So Childish Gambino did This Is America, Next Please. And so did the Mexican Americans. They did a version of it called Estados Unidos, right? So sometimes there's a conversation between art, and this is music video, right? Next, please. Sometimes artists use their influence in different ways. Maybe they don't make art, but maybe they use their voice, and K-pop has been using their voice to flood #WhiteLivesMatter social media with anti-racist posts, right? So artists can do different things and be active in different ways. Next, please. One of the things I want to close with in the then and now conversation is, and I'm an old lady. I'm happy to be old. I'm happy to have turned 60, and I'm also really happy to spend my life around young people. But we are always in conversation with the past. Many of the conversations we enter in now have been had before us. And we can draw on those conversations and get, influence from those conversations. Marvin Gaye, in 1971, made a song, What's Going On? There's a live 1972 version, and there's a 2019 version. So I'm connecting a work of art from 1971. You can watch the 1972 music video. And then now we're going to look at the 2019 images set to words and music from 1971, right? Remember, when you make art, you're always entering a conversation with your contribution through your eyes, through your ears, through your heart, right? With who you are. And so let's watch this video, and we're going to open it up for conversation. Thank you. The floor is open. Thank you. Take it away, Monte.
Thank you so much, Sheril. That was a really fantastic set of references and insights to connect them all. The students have prepped some questions about their artistic practices large, your work, and then some of the things that they're working on in class. So really quickly, I just wanted to open it up to a couple of students in New York and LA to just talk about what their classes are doing. Let's start with Elizabeth VL in New York. Elizabeth, you are off mute.
Hello. Hi, Sheril. Thanks so much.
Hi. Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining us. Here in GFS New York, we've been continuing to work on our thesis films despite all the challenges we face because of coronavirus.
Yeah.
And part of this has been learning about the dozens of positions that are available to us and honing in on the ones that we are going to hold on our films.
Right.
And in addition to this, we've been learning about what the film industry will look like post-coronavirus and what the job and internship market will look like for us.
Right. So, we don't know what it will look like, but I'm hoping that people in GFS and in film, television, schools, and actually schools around the country decide what it will look like, right? We spend a lot of time waiting for something to look away before we enter it. But I think we need to think about what do we want it to look like and make it so. So that's kind of where I'm at, right? The process, a film, let's say, per se, is the story is told at least 5 times, right? It is written, The actors tell it, the directors tell it, the DP tells it, the editor tells it, and actually the final teller of the story is the audience member, the spectator, right? So being integral with that entire process, or whatever part of that process, is really important for you to understand where you as an artist want to make change, right? So most likely the thing that will not change is how people write and how people edit, right? There's privacy, there's a whole bunch of that. But everything else has to change, and it needs to change. The question is, and do we think in isolation anymore about a notion of a film industry? Because you can't. The reason we can't think about the film industry as it was right now is COVID-19. But also, let's add racism to that. Let's add sexism to that. Why are we only fixing it for COVID-19? Why aren't we fixing it for, underrepresented racism, sexism, other kinds of accessibility issues, and so on and so forth? So I beseech you to rethink it, not just for masks and social distance, but for everything else that's wrong that's showing up in our world.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Next up, we have Kenzie. I'm just going to pull you off of mute, or you can unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much for being here today. I'm in the LA Fellows Program, and there are currently 28 students for the class of 2021, and we're currently in our second year. Right now, we're in a collaboration with the Huntington Museum to work on a project called Portraits in Light. And we've all been in the process of creating 1-minute self-portraits with influence from art from the 17th to 19th century.
Nice. Interesting. I want to say two things about the notion of self-portrait, right? Because we're constantly learning who we are. And we're so used to being one person here, like you're one kind of person with your friends, and one kind of person in church, and one kind of person with your parents, and one kind of person by yourself. And one of the things you learn as you grow up, and for instance, all that is me now, I carry around. Like I'm always the same person, like I mix the, So the thing to think about in terms of the portrait is you're not one thing. I make everybody look at Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie's Danger of a Single Story. Again, part of what's wrong with the world is that either we see ourselves one way or people see ourselves one way. And I think what we have to learn to do is how to project the many things that we are. So that's what I think about when I hear the idea of a portrait. How do you do that, and how do you get comfortable doing that? We're at a time where it's clear you don't wait for permission anymore. You got to do you, right? And so this a place like GFS is a wonderful place to start learning and trying that out for in a relatively safe environment.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kenzie. We're going to move into some questions. First, Kylan Finley.
Hi, Sheril. My first question was, do you think all artists can see the same idea?
All of us can do what?
Can all artists see the same idea?
That's a great question. What is great about art and all artists tackling the same idea is how many different versions, textures, tones, and colors of the same idea you get with artists, right? Because an idea is not one thing, right? And so the great thing about art, and that's why I had trepidation about, using my work of art in Black History Month, because would they see that idea that I was projecting, right? And so what's hard to do when you're young is to separate the version of an idea you were given from the version of an idea that you believe and understand and want to construct. But when you look in a classroom, every student in a classroom at NYU gets the same assignment, but they do it differently. And I think that is the beauty. And that's why, diversity and multiculturalism and, inclusion, belonging, accessibility, and all that is critical, because we have too many of the same ideas. We need different versions of that idea.
Thank you.
Awesome. Next up, we have Nikki Enriquez.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I guess my question to you is, what's the best way to show the reality of what's happening right now? Because we can't let this go unknown or go unseen or be twisted by the news.
Absolutely. The best way to show what's happening now is to authentically show it with your voice, with your eyes, with your point of view, right? There's a quote that I always used to use regularly. It's not what an artist sees, but how an artist sees. So the way that you can counter is you can also, I mean, most of my work right now has been what I see. But as you saw in the photograph I used for Black History Month, it was what I saw, but how I see, which is what you were interpreting. So right now, it's more about what I see, because, you know, I'm taking pictures of protests, this, that, and the other. But in that picture that I showed of the puddle, it was how I see, which you all unpacked. So you got to do both, right? But the whole point of your organization, our organization, GFS or NYU Film School or whatever, is to give you your voice. We want to see through your eyes. Basically, if you look at the way the world is turning right now, you need to educate us. I hope that answers the question, right?
Yes, it does. Thank you.
Next up, we have Andrew E. I'm just going to pull you off mute.
Yeah, for me, like I read your future essay that you wrote on identity, originality, and accountability. You know, my question is like, do you feel that the appeal of consumerism has affected the narratives that we see based on true story films today?
Oh, that's one of the greatest pains I have. I could just like fall out from that question, honestly. You know, when I was a younger teacher, and my students would complain about the crap people were making, I would just say in the classroom, it's your fault because you're going to see it. And they're just going to make more of what you want to see, right? You know, you go see this movie 3 times, yeah, we're going to get the 10th version or the 12th or the 15th version, right? But that's changed a little bit because there's so many avenues of media right now and so many complex storytelling strategies. And actually, I would even say so many subversive things. One of my young students, my students always talk about stuff and then my job is to go watch it and figure out why they like it. But I had a young Israeli student force me to watch Watchmen. And I'm like, oh goodness, what's this about now? It was the same person who told me to watch Us, so I was mad, okay? Because Us freaked me out. Anyway, so I watched Watchmen and I thought to myself, OMG, I have never seen a story that my students like for its sort of Afro-futuristic thing that is so reliant on history, right? So I'm finding that the possibilities now are endless, right? So one can feed into consumerism because why shouldn't, you know, the disenfranchised make money with their work? But there's ways of being even subversive with consumer art. Does that make sense?
Fantastic. Next we have up Elaine.
Hi, Cheryl. I'm actually an incoming freshman to Tisch this fall. So I just wanted some advice. What is some of your strongest set of advice for freshmen taking film?
Freshmen taking film, comfortable shoes. Read a lot of stories, you know, take in a lot of images outside of film, you know, be they photographs or general artwork. I'm working with a grad student right now who's from China, who's actually studying painting. I don't know if she really has an interest in cinematography, but painting and lighting have become very integral to her work, right? But the most important piece of advice I have for you is to contemplate what are the other pieces of yourself other than clear filmmaking, right? That you have other interests, you have other curiosities, there are other arts that you like. Make regular contact with those things so that when you come here, you have all of those interests, you have all of those appetites, right? It's the same idea, you are not one thing. When you come here, you're not just going to be a filmmaker, you're going to be educated, you're going to, develop and exercise all the other interests that you have so that when you arrive, right, you have the appetite for all of that as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Isabel.
Hi. So my question is, in your opinion, what is the most beautiful thing about film as an art form?
Oh, that's my favorite question. The most beautiful thing about film as an art form is one of the reasons why Patty and I show credit to 8th and 9th graders, because if you look at all the jobs in film, you'd be hard pressed to find film as a field not embracing every other field in the world. Certainly literature, certainly written language, certainly photography and music, and I would say even dance with choreography, right? But film to me, and the reason why I study film, even though I teach the arts, is film to me is an embrace of all the arts. And that's why I beseech everybody, you're interested in other things, whether it's music, photography, religion, sociology. I was interested in biology, but I was an art major, right? And that's one of the things I love about film is that I can find so many ways to honor any one of the other arts with a short film or a feature film. I love it. I feel to me, it's like being in the world of the arts. Not every film does all of it, but yeah, that's what I think.
Thank you.
Thanks, Isabel. I'd love to take some questions on the fly. Perhaps folks want to raise their hand in New York and LA, and then we'll just go in the order that they pop up. Let's start with Elias.
Hi, Cheryl. I was wondering, in times like these, art can often be used as a tool for education. And do you feel as though artists have a responsibility to educate? And how do you deal with audiences who don't want to be educated?
I think artists have done that their whole lives. And I would turn that around just a little bit. The projection is sort of outward, and I feel, and this is what I think GFS does really well, and when we had the groups, we did really well. We don't develop, schools like us don't develop arts, we develop artists. So I'm less concerned about the education the world needs, because the education the world needs is what you have to say. And I'm only interested in how you see the world and what you have to say and how who you are helps develop that. So if you have the need to educate me, that means I need educating, right? So I look inward to the artist. That's, even the admissions process does that for any school. We are looking for how someone sees and how they articulate who they are and how they see. That is how we educate the world, by telling them you're here, by showing them how you see, and by inviting them to understand how you think. All of you. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Next, let's go to Jadobi.
Hello, hey. My question is, in your talk, you talked a lot about, making films and making art through like your lens and through your eyes and everything. And I just want to ask a question, and that's, I think, is especially relevant in like these times. How do you kind of form a balance between like making art in your lens and kind of thinking about everyone else's lens in regards to the viewers and who will see the piece of art that you're making?
That will always be, has always been, and will be the struggle of every artist, right? There are several ways. You have to say what you have to say, how you want to say it, based on who you are. Period. End of story. And then you spectate your own work. You're in a community of teachers. You have classmates. The real question to me is what you need to say being seen in the work? And that's really the tension that one has to deal with, particularly for young artists. So when I am asked to read someone's script, I ask the person to tell me the story first, so I can watch them. I can watch their excitement, their emphasis, and all the interesting things. Then I read the script and I see, oh my goodness, all the excitement and effort and energy and punctuations are not in the script. Where did it go from the way you told me to the paper to the screen, right? So the world cannot inform us because the world doesn't know how we should educate, how we should tell. You know, Hollywood would, if we knew that, every movie would be a hit. We don't know that. We don't know it until we see it. So all you can do is you, because then you'll always be sure you did you. You did what was earnest, you did what was authentic, you did what was true to you. And there, to me, there's just no other way. Because the other way will take you way out of your path and you'll end up coming back to you anyway. Yeah.
Next, we're going to go with Talia.
Hi. First off, thank you so much for your words of wisdom. This question isn't as general, but I was just wondering, from the quotes that you showed us and your own art, are there any like authors or other people within the arts that heavily inspire your own artwork and even your own teaching style? Like specifically books that you also offer students as well that might help curate their own ideas and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's funny you mentioned that because I give out a lot of books to people, you know, in some of our future artist programs. And I normally grab half of them from my own bookshelf because I'm actually a book hoarder. And I buy some. And I say it doesn't matter what you read, you just need to read, right? But the things that have really, really, really influenced me, and unfortunately, I don't read a lot of books because I read so much academic stuff for my class, thesis. You know, I've read 500 pages of student thesis and scripts over the past just month or so. But the thing I think everybody should read right now, there are two books, and there are more, but the two that I've recommended, actually just recommended to one of my best friends from when I was 9 years old, Claudia Rankine's Citizen. That book must be read right now. Claudia Rankine's book, Citizen. One of the books that I constantly recommend, actually not just to students, but even to colleagues, is Jhumpa Lahiri's Interpreter of Maladies. Jhumpa Lahiri is an Indian author. Interpreter of Maladies is short stories. And what I really enjoy doing and what I really enjoy reflecting on in my own culture is stuff from other people's culture, right? So this is about Indian culture, but it really, really speaks to me. The books I've given out to my students, Sherman Alexie, I think it's The Incredibly True Something of an Indian, but a Sherman Alexie book that I just gave out, so I don't actually have it, and I Am Not Your Negro. Sherman Alexie is the Indigenous American. So there's one of his books that I bought and just gave away, and the book from the film, Raoul Peck, I Am Not Your Negro, have been quite influential in terms of it. And I love short films and I love short stories. I've read long books too, longer stories, but I'm really inspired by those works. And I Am Not Your Negro is pretty important. It's kind of like one of the books that I had from childhood. Marshall McLuhan's The Medium is the Massage, which is an awesome book. I'm very influenced by that. The books I read in my teaching, for my academic work over and over and over again, I think the one that I use most is Paul Gilroy's Black Atlantic. And Paul Gilroy's Black Atlantic talks about the notion of Blackness not being a fixed but a constantly evolving formation. And he says it started with the trips across the Atlantic. And I tied that very much into my early experience with Julie Dash's Daughters of the Dust, But the irony is a lot of my photographic images, and some of them are really dark, are influenced by, Edgar Allan Poe and Franz Kafka, and in particular, a book from my education called Notes from Underground by Fyodor Dostoevsky. So I could go on and on, but I'm sure that's more than enough.
Thank you.
Sheril, thank you so much. For everyone on the call, we're tracking this list and we will send out all of the titles that Sheril just mentioned. Next up, we have Leilani.
Hi. So my question was, what is your opinion on people that aren't Black and don't live the Black experiencing writing Black narratives or directing Black narratives? Do you feel like it's appropriate and that they can truly tell the story, or do you feel like it's kind of insulting, somewhere in the middle?
I believe that people need to make what they need to make, and I have no limitations on that at all, ever, will ever do, period, end of story. Because if that were true, then Spike Lee couldn't have made 25th Hour with white people. However, Spike Lee was asked that question by a student when I was chair of the dramatic writing department. And there's two things that he suggests: research and do it from the heart. And when, we have a complicated life. There are a lot of Black people. I grew up not knowing my own Black history. When I saw Hidden Figures, did I know Black women were calculators in NASA? No. So, I questioned my own Blackness because it was not given to me. I've been finding it I'm probably more Western influenced. So I don't have a definition of Blackness or whiteness or Latinxness or, disabled. I have no definition. Artists need to make what they need to make. They need to tell the stories they need to tell with care, whether you're telling it about yourself or anyone else, right? And so I don't put any limitations on the work. I do, however, think in those cases, one needs to spectate the work, right? Because no one ever gets it 100% right? Spike Lee gets yelled at by a lot of Black people. Women in particular in the early days, even Mary Baraka, we're all going to get yelled at because we can't represent everybody all the time the way they need to be represented, right? But it's how you do it, with the kind of love that you do it. When I saw the film Beasts of the Southern Wild, I would have swore a Black person made it. Not. So, but, every artist needs to take care with their subject. And every artist, when Spike Lee is always stepping out of his realm. When he was young and he put a Black person in, he's Black, okay, but he's not old, he's not a woman, he's not Asian, he's not what? You got to tell the stories, you got to tell with care and love and authenticity and sometimes research.
Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sheril. I think we have time for one more. That question is going to go to Andrew O.
Hi, Sheril. Thank you so much for coming online. I was wondering, since we were talking about highlighting the crises that you were mentioning earlier, and like as a filmmaker, I'm always thinking about like how do I document the things going on right now, but sometimes I'm like I don't know what to do and I'm not sure how to approach it. Like I always think about should I go out and film the protest, but where would I go from there? And I'm wondering your opinion or like what you recommend doing in yeah.
Well, the first thing is to be safe. That's, my first thing right now with everybody, whether it's protests, policing, COVID-19, is to be safe. I don't know. I'm taking a lot of pictures. Sometimes it's about a budding flower in my house. Sometimes it's about protest. Patty and I have done a lot of events when I was blogging early on, and she said, did you write this? Did you write that? I go, yeah, no, I'm not feeling it yet. So sometimes you're not feeling it, but the important thing, it sounds to me like you're doing, is collecting experiences. And I usually shoot an image or two with that experience, right? Because it's a conscious reflection of what's getting into you. It sounds to me like when you are ready, the lecture that I give the freshman class is called, I'm losing it right now. Basically it's collecting and uttering, right? And it sounds to me like you're in the collecting phase. And so collect it, write it down, take a picture of it, think about it, experience it. And then when you are ready, you have done the research, because your life is research. The images that you see is research. But start writing things down, start getting a sort of media approach to what you're taking in. We had Patty and I this morning did the future artists, future image makers. And one of the artists said, when this happened, I was unable to work. Then I went outside for the first time. And she literally told the story of how she sort of shut down and was cocooned as an artist and then opened up, and then the work just unfolded in that way. So let the process be natural to you, right? What I want to encourage you to do, not to force yourself, not to force your art. And that's of course, for everybody, because sometimes it's not there yet, or it's not cooked yet. Does that make sense?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
Wow. So good. We are just about at the end of our time. I just want to take one more moment to thank Sheril. It is, like Stosh said, an absolute privilege to have an educator and an artist of Sheril's level really come and dig into a lot of the questions that I know are especially important to you guys right now. So let's all just jump off mute one more time and give Sheril a round of applause.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. It really is my honor and privilege and blessing. As I say, I always get back far more than I ever attempt to give in any of these. But this is an important time for you. And don't force yourself to act, because if you force yourself to act, and this is the question I have for myself, Patty and I talk about this, I want to make sure I'm acting from a full and authentic me and not reacting, right? So it's really important that you give yourself the time to cook whatever feelings or ideas you have. You're also in a really loving community that's there. Now's the time to take risks. They'll guide you. They'll help you. My only fears for you, like I said right now, in terms of your art, is COVID and, policing. So do what you got to do with the people you got around you. We're all very lucky, but you're very also lucky to be in this environment. And these are the life-saving things, in terms of one's spiritual life, that are taking place right now for all of us. I don't know if any of the faculty have any particular thing they want me to cover before we end, or Stosh or Montea. Is there something you feel I didn't address that you'd like me to address for the students before we go?
Stosh, I'll let you jump in first.
I think that was fantastic, Sheril, and so many insights that you shared and somehow managed to pack into an hour. So I can't think of a single thing to add except more gratitude. And we've also had the good fortune to have some folks joining us on this call, including alumni and members of our board of directors, your colleagues as the board. So for all of them and their contributions to help continue to make sure GFS is serving our young people, we're truly grateful. And
thank you.
again.
Sheril, I'll just say, it's such a special thing for the students at this point in their development to be able to talk about in a separate way the craft of filmmaking from their development and their voice as an artist. I'm so glad that you're the person to start to really plant that seed right now. It's such an enormous pleasure, and for so many students, we'll get to see in the next couple of years, like what type of fruit that bears. So it's a special. I also am not sure if we've given a shout out to Catherine Oliver. Stosh mentioned another one of our board members is here. Let's all say hello to Catherine. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. And with that, we will let you go. New York, LA, and London. Let's hang out on the line to do a bit of housekeeping, and then we'll go back to class after that.
Can I just
Thank you.
add in, I put it up before, but just one more time.
You really are something else. You are too funny.
Just one more time.
You're sweet. Thank you. And my wish, the most important thing for any of us to create is to stay safe, mentally, spiritually, and physically. Much love to this organization, my colleagues on the board, the folks who run it, Patty, and each and every one of you young people. Save us. Bye.